Out here, it's not only the amazing views, but the way time stretches out a little longer. How laughter bellows louder among friends, and how the breeze hits just right at the summit. With All Trails, you can discover and experience the best of nature, with over 450,000 trails worldwide and navigation right at your fingertips. Find your outside with All Trails. Download the free app today and find your next outdoor adventure.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome again to the Explaining History podcast. I'm very, very honoured today to be joined by Tom Lutz, who is a distinguished writer, academic, founder of the Los Angeles Review of Books, and a kind of a literary powerhouse, really. Somebody who's written numerous things. I'm particularly drawn. The thing I really want to get is your book on idlers and loafers, and the history thereof. I'm very, very drawn to that for personal reasons. And today we're here to talk about the a literary encyclopedia of the year 1925. The height of literary modernism, and a year in which there are culture seems to kind of almost explode in terms of kind of the amount of and this is literary culture, of course. It's an era of the boom time of radio and film as well, but we're focusing particularly on literary culture today. So firstly, welcome, Tom. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks so much for having me, Nick. My pleasure.
Okay, so there are innumerable books on the market. One comes out about every 3 or 4 years that cites a particular year, 1968, 1973, 1956, what have you. It says this is the boom year for culture. And I guess I'm kind of interested to begin with, what makes 1925 so special? Why is this a kind of such a moment for culture in the 20th century?
Well, the why, of course, is the most bedeviled question for a historian, right? Why I picked it is one question, but why it has the kind of force it has had and continues to have is a very, very much more complicated question. The reason I picked it is because I was teaching courses in the 1920s in culture and literature and culture of the 1920s, and I was always frustrated at how little I could fit in the course of a semester. So I ended up picking 1925 as a year to concentrate on, so that I could go wider. I could have more different kinds of literature, more different voices in the mix, and feel a little bit more like I was covering the ground better. 1925 is the year of the Great Gatsby. Yes. Which is the classic of American literature. It's the Odyssey and the Iliad of American literature. So it makes sense just for that reason. But also in 1925 is Theodore Dreiser's American Tragedy,
Hmm.
which is his masterpiece. A lot of the avant-gardist work that was happening. So Gertrude Stein's The Making of Americans, Ezra Pound's first cantos, T.S. Eliot's first collected poems, John Dos Passos's Manhattan Transfer, which was an experimental novel. So there's all of that stuff happening. The bestsellers like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes are interesting in their own right. It's a big flowering of pulp literature. So the mystery novel is beginning its real noir phase. Dashiell Hammett is publishing his first stuff, for instance, um, and uh, and that's just as a little slight taste. Sinclair Lewis's Arrowsmith. Edith Wharton publishes an interesting novel. Willa Cather. Like so, it's the first Jewish American woman's novel of note. It's the first Native American woman's novel. It's is scheduled to publish in 25. For various reasons, it gets held up and it doesn't actually come out to 27. But at any rate, it's the beginning of lots of kinds of literature. It's the height of other kinds of literature, and so it makes sense if you're going to pick a year. And there actually has been a book written about 1922 because that's the year of Eliot's Wasteland and Joyce's Ulysses. So that's another obvious thing, but that's not for American literature. 25 is the year. Now, in terms of why, there are, the 20s was an era of very fast, severe ups and downs economically.
Yeah.
So before the great crash of 1929, there were a series of small crashes and small booms and small crashes, small booms. So 1924, everything was a little depressed. Publishers were having cash flow problems. Nobody was buying books. And so some books that were supposed to get published in 24, they just pushed off a little bit. So Dreiser's American Tragedy, for instance, was originally scheduled for 24. It got pushed to 1925. And then because it was a boom time, and they weren't sure when the next crash was going to happen, some of the stuff they might have waited till 26 if it was a more
get it out now
calm economy. They pushed ahead in 25. So there's a reason why there's so much great literature. It's also, the World War I is over. The people are recovering from that, recovering from the Spanish flu, recovering, right? And so it's the kind of a time when all of the ferment that the war causes is coming into cultural fruition.
Right.
So there's lots of reasons. Those are among them. It's also an era of great technological and scientific change. So it's Heisenberg's first quantum mechanics papers, for instance. So there's all of this ferment in the scientific world. The first television transmission is in 1925. So it's just a year of massive change in every way.
Sometimes these things coincide with with kind of what you might call like cultural sort of democratization. Rises in literacy. It becomes the ability of, say, working class writers for their voices to be heard. And sometimes that's to do with technology. Sometimes it's to do with demographics, social change. But is that kind of what's happening in this era?
Yes, and again in a lot of different ways. And in that list of firsts and changes in the literary scene that I just gave you, I left out the Harlem Renaissance. And the Harlem Renaissance is kind of its monumental text, The New Negro, which was an edited collection that had Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes and Claude McKay and all of the great writers from the black writers from the 1920s. That was 1925, and that's the result of the Great Migration of blacks to the northern cities, in particular to Harlem, to New York, and it wasn't the beginning of that. That's really in the teens. That's the largest flow of people but it was long enough to have built a cultural base in these northern cities that had its own fruition. And of course, it was not just blacks from the American South that were moving into Harlem. It was also from the West Indies, huge West Indian population in New York at the same time too, and all of that cross fertilization is happening and making for. So there's that demographic, a large demographic shift. There's also a lot of people moving from the farms to the cities. Farming is getting mechanized. Fewer hands are needed for the same number of acres, and there's no longer enough work for all 12 of your kids if you are living on a farm. So 11 of them move to the city, and so there's all of that happening, and that is one of the reasons why people like Willa Cather and her regionalist fiction is important to people. Is that there's a memories plus a kind of acculturation to the new culture happening in those books and for those readers. So and it's kind of youth culture as we've come to know it.
Yes.
It was not a significant kind of understanding that there was the first books about adolescence were written in the aughts.
Right.
The idea of adolescence is new. The idea of a youth culture is new, and the Gatsby is part of that trend as well, and Fitzgerald's work in general, part of that work as well. So it's there are lots of things, and the urbanization, the kind of the anonymity of the city, and the kind of therefore the loss of those kind of traditional boundaries. Margaret Mead is in Samoa doing her coming of age in Samoa book, which is about rethinking sexuality and youth and sexuality. There's a lot of demographic changes in a lot of different ways and regions.
And obviously, when you see, I mean, again, you see it after the Second World War, the development of youth culture. A lot of it is to do with the development of mass consumption, and not all of it, of course, but the concept of the teenager is really defined in many ways by mass consumerism and kind of opportunities in a kind of wage, leisure time, and things you can buy that didn't exist previously. So I guess there's an element of that in the mid 1920s.
Yeah, absolutely, and mass consumption in again the Highway Advertisers Association of America was founded in 1925 because the kind of billboards and this were new, and there were books published about how to design billboards so that they could be seen at different road speeds in different places. So advertising is blowing up. The amount of money spent in advertising a year rises by a factor of 10 just between 1920 and 1925. So it's a huge there's an interesting thing. Ralph Barton, who was the head of BBDO, which is still one of the biggest advertising agencies in the world. He was one of the Bs in BBDO. He wrote a book called about it was about Jesus. There were a lot of books about Jesus in 1925, but his book about Jesus was about how Jesus was a great master of marketing. And
I guess
well, he says he has a staff of only 12 sales reps, and he sold his ideas to the entire world. So there's the idea that you had some control over what masses of people thought. Right. So if you think of Walter Lippmann and John Dewey's writing about the public and and public manipulation and propaganda and that, right. So there's new thinking about all of that, and that's related to this boom in consumer culture. There's also the highway system. It's the numbering of the highway system in the U.S. happens in 1925, and it is now really seen as a nationwide system, and part of that is because it's a route for commerce, or these are routes for commerce, right? And the rural free delivery, where that is postal services that take things out so that everybody in the far sticks of West Texas could buy things from the Sears catalog and have it shipped to their houses, right? So you didn't have to live near a town to be part of the consumer culture. But yeah, the consumer culture is just growing by leaps and bounds.
in over here in the UK in the 1920s, literature and the kind of the kind of the public kind of cultural climate is really defined by pessimism, declinism. Partly that's to do with the aftermath of the First World War. Partly it's to do with a kind of an elite sense that basically the working classes are going to outbreed us one day, and civilization will implode, and anxieties about the kind of the creakiness of the empire, which was for the British is a byword for civilization against barbarism, which you have to have a very selective view of empires to take that attitude, but people didn't. Right. And I wonder, what is is there a similar sentiment in America, or is it really very different? Is there a sentiment of pessimism and declinism, or is 1925 a moment of actual optimism in literature and excitement?
I think it's both. I mean, for one thing, there's a lot of cross-fertilization. The American literature and British literature had long been tied. I mean, American literature was British literature up until the first Copyright Act, right? Because people would just go ahead. And of course, Ezra Pound is the poetry editor for various journals in America, but he's living in England and in France, and he's very much tied to continental literature and British literature, and Hemingway and Fitzgerald and Gertrude Stein and H.D. and they're all in France, right? So Hemingway is working for Ford's Transatlantic Review in 1925. So it's very, very much a mixed thing. And American periodicals and literary journals would review English books, English outlets, the Athenaeum, Nature and Athenaeum, and TLS they would review American books. So it was very much a joint project literature at that point. Yeah, there are some differences that you can point to, but there's a lot of similarities. And therefore, you had people, when Pound writes, what's it all for a botched civilization, of the old bitch gone in the teeth. Right, he's mouthing that same kind of post-war pessimism. Yeah, and so it's that is part of the literary culture, and then there's how exactly would you define a book like The Great Gatsby, which is very optimistic about the possibilities that anybody can become a rich man like Gatsby. And our young narrator is a man working in bonds, doing a tidy business in bonds. He's feeling okay about his future, and yet everything's a little tawdry and a little everybody's wondering what's it all about. So yeah, there's a bit of optimism, a bit of pessimism in the Harlem Renaissance. There's a lot of writing about new possibilities. A lot of writing about how the systems of oppression are changing rather than getting better. Yeah. So it's a very mixed bag. And I think it's a mixed bag in England as well. But
yeah. I mean, and I think perhaps one thing that, and this is to make a broad oversimplification about American culture in the 20th century, but the ability of American kind of literary culture to balance that, things like kind of the legacy of slavery, but the possibility that things might actually get significantly better, that there might be opportunities for freedom and opportunities for self-expression and all the other things that we're looking for in life. That's something that's sort of kind of.
Out here, it's not only the amazing views, but the way time stretches out a little longer, how laughter bellows louder among friends, and how the breeze hits just right at the summit. With All Trails, you can discover and experience the best of nature, with over 450,000 trails worldwide and navigation right at your fingertips. Find your outside with All Trails. Download the free app today and find your next outdoor adventure.
In honor of Military Appreciation Month, Verizon thought of a lot of different ways we could show our appreciation, like rolling out the red carpet, giving you your own personal marching band, or throwing a bumping shindig. At Verizon, we're doing all that in the form of special military offers. That's why, this month only, we're giving military and veteran families a $200 Verizon gift card and a phone on us with a select trade-in and a new line on select unlimited plans. Think of it as our way of flying a squadron of jets overhead while launching fireworks. Now that's what we call a celebration, because we're proud to serve you. Visit your local Verizon store to learn more. $200 Verizon gift card requires smartphone purchase $799.99 or more with new line on eligible plan. Gift card sent within 8 weeks after receipt of claim. Phone offer requires $799.99 purchase with new smartphone line on unlimited ultimate or postpaid unlimited plus. Minimum plan $80 a month with autopay plus taxes and fees for 36 months. Less $800 trade-in or promo credit applied over 36 months. 0% APR. Trade-in must be from Apple, Google, or Samsung. Trade-in and additional terms apply.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Era by era in the 20th century, you see again and again, particularly in America.
Yeah, it's a part of the kind of a basic fundamental American cultural understanding. This idea that anybody can become president, even a complete idiot can become president.
Yeah, imagine.
But it's not. And so that idea is in some senses that's a very positive, forward-looking, optimistic idea. In other ways, it's very debilitating idea.
Mm-hmm.
People end up kind of feeling very terrible about themselves because they didn't become president.
Yeah,
like they were told they were going to as a kid, right? So there's and I think that even the most optimistic American texts are looking at that literary text, not the most optimistic pop text, but the most interesting literary texts are looking at the underbelly of that optimism.
Yeah,
and the missed promises of that optimism.
I suppose good literature interrogates, doesn't it? It interrogates these claims.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. So Dreiser's American Tragedy, for instance, is the story of a young man who comes out of nothing, comes out of extreme poverty, gets a job in a factory, works his way up, gets involved with these young rich kids, and then of course it's an American tragedy, isn't it? It all goes south.
Normally, at the point in the story where you get involved with the young rich kids, everything sort of starts to go horribly wrong. It's
Yes,
Lord of the Flies. One thing I found really interesting about the book is that there are innumerable books out there that will talk about literature in the 1920s and talk about modernism, but the fact that you talk about kind of pulp fiction as well, and I find kind of pulp fiction and pulp sci-fi as a phenomenon fascinatingly interesting. I think firstly it's and you need to talk about it without kind of separating the two, almost saying looking in this kind of elitist way at high culture and low culture, because obviously genre fiction is something that defines the cultural experience of everybody in a way. But tell me about genre fiction in the 1920s.
Well, it's there's Hugo Gernsback writes his first science fiction novel. Hugo Gernsback is the Hugo that the Hugo Awards, which is the annual science fiction awards, is named after, and the editor of Amazing Stories, which was the big science fiction pulp magazine through the 20s and 30s. And that's not a great novel. I don't think anybody would confuse it with a great novel, but it's very interesting. And he's a guy who is foreseeing a lot of things like telemedicine that have since come to fruition. And I think that what reading fiction does for people is very similar. Always. If you give yourself over to Hugo Gernsback's fiction, you are involved in thinking about the nature of our reality and thinking about the nature of our collective future and our collective past and our ability to solve problems and our gender relations and everything else. You're thinking about all of the same stuff that you're thinking about when you're reading American Tragedy or Great Gatsby, right? So yeah, it's the same stuff. The mystery. I did look at some science fiction texts in the book. Probably not as many as I would have liked to. Unfortunately, 2025 came around faster than I would have liked. Because I would love to have made this 1,000-page book instead of only 850 pages, because there's still a lot of things I'd like to add to it. But I did do a lot on the mystery novel, and it's the beginning of Earl Stanley Bigger's Charlie Chan novels. It's Earl Stanley Gardner, and his Perry Mason series. There's all of these mystery novels going on. There's also a lot of Western novels that I talk about, and Zane Grey, and Edgar Rice Burroughs, of course, is doing science fiction and doing Westerns and doing his Tarzan stuff and fantasy novels. So he's covering all the bases. And Zane Grey did a series of different kinds of things too. And these are all the literary fiction and the pop fiction are both feeding into the film industry as they continue to do, right? So Zane Grey starts his own film company in 25 and is making films out of his own books. The first Charlie Chan film comes out almost immediately after the first Charlie Chan novel arrives, and that kind of thing. So they're moving very quickly into the film world, and therefore building a further audience for the next volume of the fiction that comes out, and that kind of thing.
And did pulp novels around this time begin to spawn things like the comic book?
The comic book is really in 1890s. It starts in the 1890s phenomenon. So it's in a sense well established already. The comics are entering the film world. Crazy Cat is rebooted. It's already had a one life as teasers in a film program. So there's animated film is growing strong, and the comic book follows all of the same generic conventions of the novels themselves. So there are mystery comic books, there are science fiction comic books, there are also romance comic books, and it's all the genres. Yeah.
Okay. So before we finish up today, let's talk just a bit about the book.
This is Paige DeSorbo from Giggly Squad. Boost Mobile is no longer that prepaid wireless company you remember. They've invested billions into building their own 5G towers across America. With Boost Mobile's networks, customers enjoy the speed and service they'd expect from the big three. Plus, groundbreaking benefits you'd only get from a true challenger of the industry. Boost Mobile will let you try the network risk-free for 30 days. So visit your nearest Boost Mobile store or find us online at boostmobile.com today.
Out here, it's not only the amazing views, but the way time stretches out a little longer and how the breeze hits just right at the summit. With All Trails, you can discover nature's best with over 450,000 trails around the world. Download the free app today.
850 pages. So that took a while. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a hard book to do the carbon dating on, because I actually wrote my first book was about a single year. It was about the year 1903, and that was published in 1991. And my second book was going to be on the 1920s.
Right.
And so I was started reading the 20s as I was finishing up the 1903 book, and then I was going to write a book about the 1950s, and then I was going to write a book on the 1980s, and I was going to catch up to myself and get up to and write about contemporary literature at the end of my career. That was my plan. So this, since it was my second book, and I literally started it in 1990, that's a 35-year project. But I got distracted along the way, and I wrote another dozen books or so in between. But this was a long gestation in one sense. It meant that I was reading all that time
Yeah.
on the 20s, and I was writing. I would write an academic article about this or that topic now and then, and I'd write I edited a book about African American essays in the 1920s at one point. I did a piece on blues in the 20s for a Black Music Research Journal, and so I was doing little bits and pieces. And there's a lot of stuff about the 20s in my book on Doing Nothing, the Slacker book. And there's some. Did a book about American regionalist fiction. And
Right.
there's a lot of stuff about the 20s in there. So I was doing bits and pieces of it along the way, but it was only in the last few years that I kind of finally figured out how I wanted to organize the thing. And that I wanted to organize it as an encyclopedia. I wrote a book about a few years ago called Aimlessness, which is a kind of essay on the essay. It's an essay about how essays are shaped and formed. And I talk about different essay forms in there, and I talk about the collage essay and the spiral essay and the argumentative essay and standard forms of the essay, narrative essay. But I really like a certain kind of essayistic mode that goes from point A to point C to point M to point B to point D to point Z to point right, and it's just like moving around. It's not quite a collage; it's more somewhere between a collage and a spiral. And I just liked the way a great essay refuses the easy path where, oh, here's a story, and therefore there's the moral of the story, or here's an argument, and therefore A plus B equals C, and you're done, right? I really like this sense that the essay never quite settles on its own solution to the problems it's raising. It just keeps raising other problems about it. And in the course of that book, I talked about the encyclopedia as a form of knowledge, which is as random as it can get. The alphabet is in the order that it's in for fairly random reasons. And so it seems to have a really clear organization. I mean, it does. It has a very clear, neat. It goes from A to Z, but it also is completely random, and therefore it creates these juxtapositions.
Yeah.
As you move from one topic to another topic, and forces you to kind of have some lingering thought of the piece that you just read as you're reading the next one. And so that is, I feel, kind of productive of building a sense of the richness and the interconnectedness of all of these different parts of culture. There's a relationship between plastics, the first journal in the field of plastic manufacture, and I don't know, the eugenics texts and the Yancy Yezierska's novel about Hester Street in New York, and Edgar Rice Burroughs' Apache novels. They all kind of bounce off each other in ways that I think are productive of understanding, in ways that are below the reader's radar for the most part, but actually do a lot of work.
And it sounds like an incredible way to mentally situate yourself in the era. If because we can only ever imagine the past without the means of time travel. So, but being able to mentally and kind of emotionally, I suppose, situate yourself, it sounds like a fantastic means for doing that.
Yeah.
So,
it was so much fun. And I don't know if you want to get into any of the more eggheady historiographical theory aspects of it or not, but
I do. I would say that I'd like to do is to invite you back to talk about that, if that
Okay.
would be okay.
Oh yeah, sure.
It's one of those things. I think that there's so much to say that I'll drop you a line and hopefully we can arrange another chat.
Oh, I would love it. I would love it. Yeah.
But before we finish, let's do a bit of a commercial plug for the book. So it's available at the moment, is that right? Or is it on?
Yes, it's available now. Yep. It's available now. It's at your local bookstore, at your local library, and of course online. And
please get it there. We always say on the podcast, support your local bookstore and your library. They are, without them, this book couldn't have happened.
Yes.
Nobody's ever going to say, do you know what? Without Amazon, I would have never written this book. But Jeff Bezos, without his intervention here, none of this was possible. But with your local, the local libraries, the local bookshops are the ecosystem that make new writing possible. So please
absolutely
do support them.
Absolutely. I mean, people would say the opposite. They would say, I would have written another book, but Amazon made it financially impossible for me to continue to be a writer. So.
Yes, and they are saying that in
yes.
in their droves, unfortunately. But there you go. So there we must finish. But Tom, it's been a pleasure and an education to talk with you today. It really has. And it would be great to chat again. It really would.
Okay, I look forward to it.
Fabulous. And I wish you all the very best with the book. It sounds like it's going to be an absolute phenomenon, and take good care. And I wish you
Thank you so much, Nick.
Welcome to It Takes Energy, presented by Energy Transfer, where we talk all things oil and natural gas. Oil and gas drive our economy, ensure our country's security, and open pathways to brighter futures. When it comes to meeting the world's energy needs, more is better. What we mean is our world needs a wide range of energy sources to meet our increasing needs. Just wind or solar won't get us there, as the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. With our growing population and the increasing use of energy-demanding technologies like AI, reliability is key, and the reliability of natural gas is unmatched by wind and solar. That doesn't mean we all can't work together, but natural gas is vital to ensuring we meet our energy needs. Look around, and you'll see the essential role oil and gas plays in our lives. Our world needs oil and gas, and people rely on us to deliver it. To learn more, visit energytransfer.com.
In honor of Military Appreciation Month, Verizon thought of a lot of different ways we could show our appreciation, like rolling out the red carpet, giving you your own personal marching band, or throwing a bumping shindig. At Verizon, we're doing all that in the form of special military offers. That's why, this month only, we're giving military and veteran families a $200 Verizon gift card and a phone on us with a select trade-in and a new line on select unlimited plans. Think of it as our way of flying a squadron of jets overhead while launching fireworks. Now that's what we call a celebration, because we're proud to serve you. Visit your local Verizon store to learn more. $200 Verizon gift card requires smartphone purchase $799.99 or more with new line on eligible plan. Gift card sent within 8 weeks after receipt of claim. Phone offer requires $799.99 purchase with new smartphone line on Unlimited Ultimate or Postpaid Unlimited Plus. Minimum plan $80 a month with autopay plus taxes and fees for 36 months. Less $800 trade-in or promo credit applied over 36 months. 0% APR. Trade-in must be from Apple, Google, or Samsung. Trade-in and additional terms apply.